Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
My path towards seeking revenge began on the day I uncovered my wife's affair. For the sake of privacy, let's call her Carrie. After spending 14 years in marriage and raising 3 wonderful children together, my life took an unexpected and irreversible turn. It all started when I accidentally saw an explicit text message on her work phone. This message appeared for just a brief moment on the lock screen, clearly out of place for a work-related device. The name of the sender was also visible, revealing the identity of the person involved. We'll call him Perry. To provide some context, Carrie and I got married when I was 25 years old, and she was 22. At the time, I was employed as a high school teacher, while she worked as a registered nurse. After the birth of our first child, Carrie made the decision to become a stay-at-home mom to take care of our growing family. Financially, it was a challenging period for us. To make ends meet, I took on an administrative role within my school department and also coached 2 sports teams to earn some extra income. Despite the difficulties, we managed to get by, and with the annual salary increases, I eventually found myself in a position to stop coaching. This allowed me to focus on furthering my career by pursuing an administrative credential through a specialized program. As I transitioned into an administrative role, our youngest child reached the age where he was ready to start preschool. Carrie felt it was the right time to return to the workforce. Although nursing positions are generally available, the most desirable roles are not always easy to secure. Carrie had to start from scratch, working alongside much younger nurses who could handle consecutive double shifts, which was incredibly taxing for her. When Carrie approached her supervisor about the possibility of moving into a different position, she was informed that without a bachelor's degree, at that time, she only held a 2-year associate degree in nursing, ADN, there were no opportunities for advancement. Despite this setback, I reassured her that we had a solid support system in place. With our youngest child enrolled in preschool, the availability of after-school recreation programs, and my retired mother who was always more than willing to help by picking up and watching the kids, Carrie had all the support she needed to pursue her career aspirations. However, as she re-entered the workforce and dealt with these professional challenges, I had no idea that another, much more personal and devastating challenge was about to shake the very foundation of our family. This explicit message from Perry, starkly displayed on Carrie's work phone, was the harbinger of a betrayal that would set me on a path I never anticipated. My focus shifted from supporting Carrie's career and managing our family to grappling with the deep sense of betrayal and the desire for revenge that consumed me. I wholeheartedly supported her dream of earning a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, BSN. It took her 3 years of hard work, but she eventually completed her degree and was promoted to a more prestigious position at the hospital. Life seemed to be going exceptionally well. Our finances were stable, and we finally managed to move into a larger home, buy new cars, and enjoy other luxuries. My career also took a positive turn. I transitioned from school administration to a district administration role, which provided me with more time to spend with Carrie and the kids. Her work schedule became more predictable, and despite my often long work hours, this change allowed us to fulfill our dream of traveling to the places we had listed during our honeymoon. She had lovingly kept that list in our wedding album. Years went by, and one day I noticed that she was carrying 2 phones. When I asked her about it, she explained that one was provided by the hospital for work purposes. I didn't think much of it since my district also offered employees a choice between a work phone or a phone stipend. I had opted for the stipend myself. Months continued to pass, and I was convinced that we were a happy, content family. We had a routine where I would charge my phone in our den, and she would charge her phones in our guest bedroom, which doubled as a computer room. This setup allowed us to keep an eye on the kids while they were online. Life seemed perfect. We were in a great place financially, and our family felt complete. The new home and cars, the successful careers, and the quality time spent together painted a picture of an ideal family life. We traveled to many of the places we had dreamt of visiting, ticking off destinations from our honeymoon list one by one. However, as the years rolled on, the 2 phones she carried became a subtle, nagging concern in the back of my mind. Despite her plausible explanation, something felt off. Yet, I dismissed these feelings, trusting her and focusing on the positives. Little did I know that this seemingly perfect life had an undercurrent of deception that would soon come to light. I was in the middle of updating some computer software when I noticed a light blinking on her work phone. Normally, she kept her phones face down while they charged, so this caught my attention. Driven by curiosity, I reached over and flipped her phone face up. To my shock, a message appeared on the lock screen. It was explicit, asking her when she'd like to receive a BJ again, but using much cruder language. The sender's name was Perry. In that instant, everything around me seemed to stop. I was paralyzed by what I had just seen. My first thought was, what on earth is this doing on her work phone? A message like that could easily get her fired. But then a more painful realization hit me, was Carrie having an affair? It's fascinating how the mind works in moments of crisis. Suddenly, I began to recall various odd things Carrie had done that I had either brushed off or accepted without much thought. She often left the room to answer calls or respond to texts, explaining that it was necessary to maintain patient confidentiality. This made sense to me since the education field has similar privacy regulations regarding students. Sometimes, she would come home with a faint scent of cologne on her clothes. She attributed this to helping male patients move, and I took her explanation at face value. However, I always found it odd that the cologne scent seemed to be consistent. Once my awareness was heightened, I started to notice many things I had previously overlooked. Our intimacy had significantly declined, which I had partially attributed to her needing to leave the house at odd hours to cover shifts for other nurses who called in sick. But now, everything seemed to fit into a different, more troubling picture. I also remembered where I had seen the name Perry before. After doing some checking, I confirmed that he was indeed a doctor at the hospital where Carrie worked. This revelation connected all the dots, painting a clear and painful image of betrayal. My mind raced back over the years, re-evaluating every strange moment and every excuse. What I had once dismissed now seemed like glaring red flags. This newfound awareness felt like a door had been opened, and through it, I saw all the signs I had missed. Each recollection was a stab to my heart, revealing the painful truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The trust one had in my wife was shattered, and with it, the life we had built together seemed to crumble. For about a week, I wandered through my days in a fog, trying to piece everything together. My mind was a swirl of confusion and pain. One day, one of our kids left a book in Carrie's car, giving me a perfect excuse to visit her at the hospital. Carrie had mentioned that personal visits were discouraged, but I saw an opportunity to learn more. While my child fetched Carrie's car key, pretending that I had left mine at home, I struck up a conversation with a nurse in the lobby. I joked about how work phones might seem convenient but actually kept you on call around the clock. This light-hearted comment led the nurse to share an interesting piece of information. She mentioned that the hospital was quite stingy about providing cell phones to nurses, and only high-ranking executives received them. This certainly didn't include Carrie. With most of my suspicions now confirmed, I decided to take a day off from work to consult a divorce lawyer. The news from the lawyer was crushing. We lived in a community property state with a no-fault divorce policy. Despite the fact that I earned more money than Carrie and that she had been the primary caretaker of our kids, our marriage of over 10 years meant the outcome of filing for divorce looked bleak. I stood to potentially lose the house, pay alimony, and she would take a significant portion of my retirement savings. I would also be responsible for child support for years unless we were granted joint custody. The most heartbreaking revelation was that her infidelity didn't matter in the eyes of the law. It simply didn't matter. This realization left me feeling utterly devastated. There was only one person I could confide in about this matter. She was a fellow teacher who had also transitioned into administration. Although she was still based at a school site, we had remained close. Let's call her Anne. Anne had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got another woman pregnant. After that traumatic experience, she focused on her career. Over the years, we discovered that we shared many viewpoints about K-12 education, which helped us form a strong bond. Anne was someone I felt I could trust completely. I reached out to her and poured out my heart, sharing the painful discovery and the legal implications. She listened with empathy and offered a shoulder to lean on during this incredibly difficult time. Her support was a beacon of light in what felt like an endlessly dark tunnel. Anne's understanding and advice gave me a semblance of strength and clarity, helping me navigate the emotional and practical turmoil that lay ahead. During this period, I continued to reflect on the many small, seemingly insignificant details that now stood out in stark relief. The late-night calls, the frequent absences, the odd excuses, everything seemed to fit into the jigsaw puzzle of Carrie's betrayal. Each memory felt like a wound reopening, and I grappled with the bitter reality of my situation. In the midst of all this chaos, my interactions with Anne provided a rare sense of stability. Her own experiences with betrayal and her steadfast dedication to her career mirrored my current struggles in many ways. She became a vital source of comfort and guidance as I began to navigate the treacherous waters of separation and divorce. I spoke with Anne, and something she said completely changed my outlook on the situation. She told me, "If you're unhappy with the hand you've been dealt, change the deck." This simple yet profound advice made me realize I needed to take control of my circumstances. I faced two main challenges. I earned more money than Carrie, and she had more time to dedicate to caring for the kids. Addressing the second issue seemed more straightforward. In every district office, there are certain positions known for offering a quick path to higher roles, as well as those that are considered the undesirable, regulatory roles akin to tedious military tasks. One of these dead-end regulatory roles had recently opened up again. Ambitious administrators typically use such positions as stepping stones, moving on to better roles as soon as they can. I decided to speak with our district superintendent about transferring to that position. He was initially surprised by my request, but I explained that it was my turn to make a sacrifice for the team. I also mentioned that taking on this role would help fill a gap in my administrative experience. After hearing my reasoning, he agreed to the transfer. The job involved mainly number crunching with little to no interaction with staff or students. This setup allowed me to set my own schedule and even work from home using a laptop. This newfound flexibility gave me the precious free time I needed to take a more active role in my children's lives. I could now take them to school, pick them up afterward, and be with them at home instead of relying on after-school recreation programs or my mother to watch them. I started helping them with their homework, cooking dinner, and generally being more present in their daily lives. My ultimate goal was to become their primary caregiver. This new arrangement allowed me to focus on my children in a way I hadn't been able to before. By taking on the new position, I was able to address the imbalance in our roles and lay the groundwork for achieving joint custody if it came to that. My days were now filled with moments that mattered, driving the kids to school, chatting with them about their day, helping them with school projects, and creating a warm, supportive home environment. Anne's advice had truly set me on a new path, and with each passing day, I felt more empowered to shape my future and that of my children. The sacrifices I made in my career were more than worth it for the time and connection I gained with them. I can't express enough how much I genuinely enjoyed taking on a more active role in my children's daily lives. Although my salary remained the same, it became clear that I needed to find a way for Carrie to significantly increase her income from her current nursing position. I remembered how frustrated she felt when her supervisor remarked that, in the future, bachelor's degrees would be insufficient and everyone would need at least a master's degree. Her hard work in earning her BSN felt diminished by that comment. I encouraged Carrie to consider starting a Master of Science in Nursing, MSN, program. I reassured her that, with my new flexible work schedule, I could continue to care for the kids, giving her the time she needed to study and attend classes. At first, she was hesitant, but then I suggested, "You could have every evening free to study or do whatever you want." Her eyes lit up instantly, likely thinking about the added freedom to spend more time with Perry. To ensure she was truly making progress in her MSN program, I decided to directly cover her tuition and fees at the university. The program was expected to take her 2 to 3 years to complete. Those years brought their own set of challenges. Sometimes, I could sense when she was rushing off to meet Perry or returning from seeing him. There was a distinct excitement or satisfaction in her eyes that wasn't there when she was focused on her coursework. I had to either offer a smile or pretend I hadn't noticed. During this time, my patience was often tested. There were moments when the tension boiled over, leading to arguments about trivial matters. Despite these difficulties, I remained committed to supporting her academic goals, hoping that her advanced degree would eventually lead to a better financial position for her and, indirectly, a more balanced dynamic in our responsibilities. My new role at home allowed me to deeply engage with my children's lives. I cherished driving them to school, helping them with homework, and preparing dinners. These daily routines became the highlights of my life, providing a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Watching them grow and being there for their milestones gave me immense joy. Meanwhile, Carrie's progress through the MSN program continued, albeit with noticeable distractions. Her interactions with Perry, though painful for me, were something I chose to endure silently. I focused on maintaining a stable and nurturing environment for our kids, putting their well-being above all else. The financial burden of paying for Carrie's education was significant, but I viewed it as an investment in our future. I believed that her obtaining a master's degree would ultimately benefit our entire family. Throughout this period, I had to balance my emotional turmoil with a pragmatic approach, striving to create a better outcome for everyone involved. Despite the undercurrents of Carrie's affair, I poured my energy into being the best father I could be. Each day brought new challenges, but it also offered new opportunities to bond with my children and support their development. These experiences strengthened my resolve to navigate through the complexities of our situation with resilience and hope. A few times, I came dangerously close to blowing the entire charade. I had to control my anger and apologize instead of lashing out with the harsh words she probably deserved. Throughout this difficult period, and remained my steadfast confidant. I had previously recommended her for the fast-track role I once held, and she joined me at the district office. And had the qualifications, diligence, and ambition, she just needed the opportunity to impress the higher-ups. After she did an excellent job, I even received praise for recommending her. Ann and I began our own affair. It wasn't a fiery, passionate romance but rather two friends fulfilling each other's needs. And played an essential role in my life. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the facade of being the oblivious, devoted husband. So, when Carrie came home smiling after spending time with Perry, I managed to endure it and even smile back, knowing I had Ann by my side. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her MSN degree and earned a significant promotion at her hospital. Her salary increased substantially, even surpassing mine. We celebrated her achievement with a congratulatory dinner, where I jokingly remarked about her becoming the family's breadwinner. She laughed and playfully suggested that I should become a stay-at-home dad. About a month later, I returned to the lawyer. She didn't recognize me at first, but I informed her of the significant financial changes. With this updated information, she prepared the divorce petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I arranged for Carrie to be served with the papers. The deputy knocked on our front door, and I pointed Carrie out. After confirming her identity, the deputy handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy as a witness, I confronted Carrie about her affair with Perry, though I didn't reveal how long I had known. I told Carrie to go and find happiness with her doctor lover. Her reaction was explosive. She yelled at me, tried to lie her way out of it, and eventually rushed towards me in a rage. The deputy stepped in, warning her that women could now face legal consequences for domestic incidents. He advised her to pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay for the time being. Carrie agreed to leave after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. Although I didn't directly inform the children, I confided in my mother, who then shared the news with my sister. The information slowly spread to my sister's kids and then to their cousins, my children. Within a few days, my kids found out that their dad was divorcing their mom because she had a boyfriend. Eventually, the court finalized our divorce. I was granted primary custody of the children since I had been their main caregiver for the past few years. I retained the house with the agreement that I would refinance it to buy out Carrie's share. Additionally, she was ordered to pay child support. I used this as leverage to negotiate her relinquishing any claims to my retirement savings if I bought her out. Taking advantage of the era when banks were readily providing mortgages and refinancing, I successfully refinanced my house. This allowed me to buy out Carrie's share and secure a stable home for my children and me. The process, though stressful and emotionally draining, ultimately provided a sense of closure and a fresh start. With some financial help from my parents, I managed to buy out Carrie's share in both our home and my retirement savings. The day she signed all the legal documents with my lawyer to sever any potential financial ties was a moment of immense relief for me. It felt like I could finally exhale and breathe freely again. I celebrated this significant milestone with Ann, who had been my unwavering support throughout this ordeal. I don't hesitate to admit that I found comfort in her arms during the toughest times. Ann and I eventually tied the knot. Her promotion to a higher role prompted me to reclaim my former district position when my youngest child entered high school. Despite the challenges we faced, Carrie and I maintained a positive relationship after the divorce. We attended family therapy sessions with the kids and worked together to figure out how to co-parent effectively. During the initial months, the kids often questioned Carrie about why she needed a boyfriend when their dad had always been there for them. With the guidance of the therapist, Carrie addressed their concerns. I didn't need to say a word. Her demanding work schedule meant she missed out on spending quality time with the kids. I felt sorry that they weren't getting enough time with their mother, so I encouraged them to maintain contact with her through phone calls. When Carrie learned about my proposal to Ann, she offered her congratulations. I reassured her that it wouldn't be a problem for her to marry Perry if she wanted to. However, her mood quickly turned somber. She shared with me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse from the hospital. This revelation added another layer of complexity to an already emotionally charged situation. Carrie's new position demanded so much of her time that she had little left for Perry. When they did meet, she couldn't be as lively and carefree as before. It was a strange situation to witness, my ex-wife, who had cheated on me and caused our marriage to fall apart, now seeking sympathy from me. Yet, I found myself devoid of any compassion to offer her. What I did have were years filled with resentment and frustration. The knowledge that another man had been involved with my wife weighed heavily on me. The stress from this ordeal took a physical toll on me. I lost weight and developed hypertension, prompting me to confide in my doctor about the true cause of my health issues. Even my dentist noticed the impact, warning me about teeth grinding and the potential need for dental implants. There were times when I had to maintain intimacy with Carrie to keep up the facade, though thankfully, these instances were infrequent. I would make excuses about using condoms, claiming it was to rekindle memories of our early relationship or due to a possible bladder infection. I then took an STD test afterward, waiting for the results before being with Anne again. Despite these challenges, the sacrifices seemed worthwhile in the end. Although Carrie received a substantial payout when I bought out her share of the house and my retirement, she gradually returned that money through child support payments. Her losses were even greater in other ways. Her time with our kids was limited to every other weekend and a couple of holidays. This arrangement left her with minimal involvement in their daily lives, while I continued to be their primary caregiver and the central figure in their upbringing. Perry ended their relationship, and his life situation wasn't enviable. He had been divorced twice, had 5 kids, and was burdened with alimony and child support payments. Meanwhile, I managed to retain custody of my children, keep my house, maintain my income and retirement savings, and even gain Anne's companionship. I am genuinely content with my life now. Considering this all happened in a community property state with no-fault divorce laws, it feels like a form of poetic justice. If this doesn't qualify as pro-revenge, I don't know what does. Second story. I'm a 42-year-old woman, and 3 years ago, I cheated on my husband, who is also 42. This decision devastated our family, and I regret my actions every single day. My husband and I started dating when we were both 19. We weren't each other's first partners, but for 22 years, I thought we were happy together. My husband can sometimes lose his temper, but he's someone who expresses his emotions openly. He handles a lot, and when he's angry, he lets out everything that's been bothering him. I can relate because I tend to do the same thing, which sometimes leads to me saying hurtful things in the heat of the moment. Surprisingly, he never held those moments against me. Our intimate life used to be wonderful. He desired more closeness and made an effort every day. However, being a stay-at-home mom to our 5 kids, 3 girls and 2 boys, left me exhausted. He would voice his dissatisfaction when we didn't connect intimately, and I found it frustrating. Looking back, I realize we could have been more intimate more often. Despite working 60 hours a week, my husband helps out around the house. He makes sure I get to sleep in on weekends and that I wake up to a clean house and breakfast. As the years rolled by and our oldest 3 kids began their college journeys, I found myself grappling with the infamous empty nest syndrome. The house seemed quieter, and I felt a sense of restlessness creeping in. Even though my 2 boys were still in junior high, they were becoming more independent by the day, leaving me with a sense of purposelessness. My husband, observant as ever, suggested I find a job to fill the void. In hindsight, I realize I should have declined his well-meaning advice. Perhaps I should have explored hobbies or made different choices altogether. My husband, though a tad on the heavier side, remained as handsome as ever. As for myself, my weight fluctuated between 150 and 210 pounds over the years. When I landed a job as a customer service representative, I was tipping the scale at 160 pounds, feeling relatively good about myself. It had been a whopping 21 years since I had last worked, so returning to the workforce felt like a positive step. As time passed, I found myself mingling more with my younger coworkers, most of them in their 20s. My husband encouraged these interactions, recognizing my need for female companionship. I had always supported him spending time with his colleagues, so it seemed only fair to reciprocate. However, these younger colleagues unknowingly began to influence my thoughts. They planted seeds of doubt, making me question whether I could do better than my husband, whether his looks were enough, and whether I was somehow being held back in life. Even amidst the hustle and bustle of office banter, the words of my coworker echoed in my mind like a relentless drumbeat. He, like many others in our circle, remarked on my husband's demeanor, noting a disparity between his outward projection of toughness and a perceived lack of genuine assertiveness. At the time, I found myself oddly swayed by this observation, as if it were a hidden truth that had been waiting to be unveiled. It's peculiar, isn't it, how the mind can latch onto a single notion and spin it into a web of doubt. Despite years of shared laughter, tender moments, and unwavering support, I suddenly began to view my husband through a different lens. The man I had always admired for his strength and integrity now seemed like a character in a play, reciting lines without truly embodying them. But why did I allow these fleeting remarks to gnaw at the foundation of our relationship? In the quiet moments of introspection, I grappled with this question, searching for answers that seemed to slip through my fingers like sand. Perhaps it was the relentless march of time, with its accompanying whispers of midlife crises and unfulfilled dreams, that stirred the dormant embers of discontent within me. Or maybe it was the insidious influence of societal norms, whispering tales of alpha and beta males, urging me to seek validation in the arms of another. Regardless of the catalyst, the seeds of doubt took root and began to bloom with alarming speed. Every jest, every offhand comment, every lingering gaze from my coworkers became fuel for the growing fire of uncertainty. And in the midst of this turmoil, I found myself drawn to the attention of one particular colleague, a man whose easy charm and rugged appeal seemed to beckon to me like a siren's song. He was my age, with a confidence that bordered on cockiness and a physique that spoke of hours spent sculpting perfection. In his presence, I felt a thrill of excitement that I hadn't experienced in years, a rush of adrenaline that drowned out the whispers of guilt and doubt. And when he voiced his own misgivings about my husband, echoing the sentiments of my coworkers, I found myself nodding along in silent agreement, as if his words held the key to unlocking the mysteries of my discontent. Looking back on those days now, I am filled with a profound sense of regret and disbelief. How could I have allowed myself to be swayed by the shallow opinions of others, to betray the trust and love of a man who had stood by me through thick and thin? The memories of those moments, tainted though they may be, serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships, and the dangers of allowing doubt to poison the wellspring of love and devotion. The gravity of our situation hit me like a ton of bricks one evening during dinner. My husband's hand clenched into a fist, shattering a glass with a sharp, resounding crack. His eyes, usually warm with affection, now blazed with an intensity one had never seen before, burning with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "You have a hickey," he spat out, his voice laced with fury, as he wrapped his injured hand and stormed out, leaving for urgent care without another word. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to suffocate, as my sons sat in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. The eldest, overcome with emotion, bolted from the room, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. In the aftermath of the chaos, I found myself dialing my lover's number, my voice trembling with anger and frustration. His admission cut through me like a knife, as he callously confessed to marking me as his own territory with that damning hickey. Disgust churned in the pit of my stomach, mingling with a deep sense of regret that seemed to weigh me down like a leaden anchor. It was in that moment, as the clock ticked past midnight and the house fell into an eerie silence, that my husband returned home. His eyes bore into mine with a piercing intensity, demanding answers that I was reluctant to give. But his gaze, sharp as a dagger, left me with no choice but to confess the truth. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 accusations. I wanted to deny it, to plead innocence, but the truth hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with its undeniable presence. And so, with a heavy heart, I whispered the damning truth, 4 months. But his next question struck me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs and leaving me reeling in disbelief. "Did you perform for him?" The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, staining the very fabric of our marriage with their venomous implications. I remained silent, unable to meet his gaze, as he circled around me like a predator stalking its prey. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he uttered words that cut through me like a jagged blade. "I want to divorce you, you cheating witch." The venom in his tone was like nothing I had ever heard before, a stark departure from the love and tenderness that had once defined our relationship. All I could do was stand there, tears streaming down my face, as the weight of his words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. But what hurt the most was not the sting of his betrayal or the bitterness of his words, it was the sight of our sons, standing silently at the bottom of the stairs, their eyes filled with a mixture of confusion, hurt, and disappointment. In that moment, I realized the true extent of the damage that had been done, the irreversible scars that would forever mar the fabric of our family. Their stares bore into me with a searing intensity, filled with a potent mix of anger and disappointment. I couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration towards my husband for airing our grievances in front of our children. In hindsight, I realized that anger should have been directed inward, towards myself. I should have been utterly repulsed by my own actions, but instead, I was blinded by a selfish desire to justify my choices. In the aftermath of that fateful confrontation, my husband seemed to shut himself off from me completely. It was as if a switch had been flipped, extinguishing the flames of love and affection that had once burned brightly between us. I found solace in the supportive words of my female coworkers, who assured me that I was making the right decision by pursuing my own happiness. Their encouragement bolstered my resolve, convincing me that I deserved more than what my marriage could offer. Fueled by their words of empowerment, I made the decision to spend more time with my lover, despite my husband's objections. The idea of a trial separation had never appealed to me, yet my husband took the initiative to move out of our family home and into an apartment just a stone's throw away. The repercussions of my choices soon began to manifest in the strained relationships with my children. My sons treated me with disdain, while my daughters withdrew into a stony silence. Despite their protests, my lover continued to intrude upon our family space, refusing to leave even in the face of my husband's presence. During one particularly tense encounter, my soon-to-be ex-husband displayed a remarkable sense of composure, calmly acknowledging my lover's physical prowess with a knowing smile. "Not yet," he remarked, a glint of determination in his eyes. "But soon." In the aftermath of their departure, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, frustration, and resentment simmered beneath the surface as I confronted my lover about his unacceptable behavior. Yet, my attempts at communication fell on deaf ears, as he brushed off my concerns with a dismissive wave of his hand. As the divorce proceedings drew to a close, we reached a tentative agreement, dividing our assets evenly and arranging a payment plan for my husband to buy out his share of our home. Despite joint custody, my sons made the heartbreaking decision to live with their father, further deepening the chasm that had formed between us. And as the dust settled, I found myself estranged from my older daughters, their absence a painful reminder of the fractured bonds that once held our family together. They don't return my phone calls anymore. I learned about one of my daughters being in a serious relationship only when my ex-husband mentioned it in passing. It felt surreal when it happened, almost like an out-of-body experience. Watching him sign the divorce papers was excruciatingly painful. When he took off his wedding ring and placed it on the document, I felt a lump rise in my throat, choking back tears. After he left, the realization hit me hard: I had never apologized to him. Sitting there, holding the pen, staring at the ring, I comprehended the full extent of my mistakes. I had destroyed my marriage, severed my bond with my children, and ended up in what seemed like an abusive relationship. Overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow, I cried, struggling to catch my breath. Eventually, I mustered the strength to sign the papers. A week after the divorce, my lover hit me for the first time. It happened so suddenly. I was casually telling him about my day when I accidentally bumped into the nightstand, causing his phone to fall. His expression turned dark, and he slapped me, calling me clumsy. Desperate and scared, I called my ex-husband. His immediate concern was for our children, asking, "Does he harm my children?" I assured him that he didn't, and he hung up without another word. That night, I cried harder than I ever had before. Soon, my lover became more comfortable using physical force against me. This abusive behavior continued for 2 months, and at the time, I felt like I deserved it. I rationalized it as a form of karma for my own wrongdoings. My ex-husband had never laid a hand on me, but here I was, being mistreated and accepting it as my penance. The abuse only stopped when my daughter, who had come home from college due to COVID-19, became his victim. She was the only one of my children who chose to stay with me. My 2 older children had sided with their father. One evening, my lover hit her, and she immediately called her father. Without hesitation, my ex-husband came to the house. He walked in with a cold, determined expression and offered my lover a chance to hit him. When my lover refused, my ex-husband beat him brutally. Throughout the entire ordeal, his face remained emotionless, as if he had turned off all feelings. I had to beg him to stop. Looking at our daughter's bruised face, he asked her which hand my lover had used to hit her. When she pointed out the right hand, my ex-husband stomped on it, breaking it with a sickening crunch. After everything was over, he dragged my lover outside, never once acknowledging my presence. He drove him to the hospital and told the ER staff that my lover had fallen down the stairs. I don't know what was said between them, but the next day, my lover quit his job and left me. Life carried on. I continued working, while my ex-husband began to get involved with some of my single friends, including a few of my coworkers. It was a strange twist of fate, seeing him move on while I was left to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. One of the women my ex-husband became involved with was the same coworker who had once encouraged me to cheat. I only discovered this fact later, when she was upset over him bragging to others about their intimate encounters. She constantly asked me about him, wondering why he wasn't returning her calls. It was painful to realize he was treating her this way, and I suspected he did it on purpose. I tried going on dates with a few different men, but none of those relationships lasted long. Being a single mother of 5 seemed to scare men away. Intimacy was another issue. Looking back, even with my lover, none of them could satisfy me the way my ex-husband could. This realization made me question why I had allowed everything to spiral out of control. I used to be happy, so how did I end up manipulated and broken? I still don't understand why. During this tumultuous period, my house was eerily quiet. My boys would either stay in their rooms or spend time at their dad's place. My third daughter was the only one who remained somewhat present. My other daughters chose to avoid speaking to me, and the silence was deeply painful. Noticing the fractured state of our family, my ex-husband decided to hold a family meeting. He managed to gather all the kids at our home, and for a brief moment, I felt a glimmer of hope having everyone together again. However, it quickly became clear that most of them didn't want to be there. My ex-husband encouraged the children to communicate with me, but my youngest child lashed out, using hurtful words. It was a heart-wrenching moment, realizing how much damage had been done and how difficult it would be to mend the rifts in our family. Wow, this whole roller coaster of emotions blindsided me like a freight train on a foggy night, leaving me reeling and nursing a heartache that felt like it could swallow me whole. And right in the thick of it, just as I'm trying to make sense of the chaos, there's my ex, stepping into the scene like the protagonist in a dramatic showdown, ready to lay down the law with all the authority of a seasoned judge. With a voice as firm as the grip of a vice, he poses a question that hits me like a ton of bricks. Have I ever heard you use that word for your mother? The weight of his words hangs heavy in the air, and our son, bless his heart, shakes his head in a mixture of realization, maybe a hint of guilt, like he's just been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And then, like a sage dispensing timeless wisdom, my ex goes into full-on dad mode, reminding our son that his mom, that's me, is the unsung hero, the one who's been there through thick and thin, holding our family together with a love that knows no bounds. He makes it crystal clear that whatever mess we've got going on between us adults, it's not our children's burden to bear. They need to start showing their mom the respect she deserves, no ifs, ands, or buts. And let me tell you, the way he looks at each of them in turn, his eyes conveying a whole novel's worth of emotions, well, it's enough to make a grown woman like me start reevaluating her entire existence. Surprisingly enough, that little intervention turns out to be a turning point for me and the kids. Fast forward to our annual divorce anniversary, yeah, that's a thing in our twisted little world, and lo and behold, we're actually managing to keep it civil. We're laughing, chatting, and even sharing a few warm, fuzzy moments that make me wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's hope for us yet. My ex starts showing up more often, playing the role of Mr. Fix-It around the house and engaging in heartfelt conversations about the kids, like we used to back in the good old days when life was simpler and our hearts weren't quite so battered and bruised. But just when I start to let my guard down and entertain the thought that maybe, just maybe, we could patch things up and give this whole co-parenting thing another shot, he pulls away, leaving me standing there like a deer caught in the headlights, wondering what the heck just happened. And then, as if to add insult to injury, I hear through the grapevine that he's moved on, with our youngest kid's teacher, no less. She's a whole decade younger, with a smile that could light up a room and interests that mirror his own like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. And while I try my best to be polite and keep my composure, inside, it feels like my heart is being ripped out of my chest, piece by agonizing piece, every time I see them together. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, unable to tear my eyes away even though I know it's only going to end in tears. The way he looks at her, the way he touches her, the way she laughs at his jokes, it's like I'm witnessing the ghost of our former love, haunting me with memories I'd rather forget. And then, in a moment of painful clarity, it hits me like a ton of bricks. This is why people envied us, why they kept telling me how lucky I was to have him. How did I not see it before? How did I let our love slip through my fingers like grains of sand, only to realize too late what I had lost? And just when I think I've hit rock bottom, life throws me another curveball. They're expecting a baby, and they're planning to tie the knot. It's like a sucker punch to the gut, leaving me doubled over and gasping for breath as the weight of it all comes crashing down on me like a tidal wave of despair. And so there I am, lying beside him with tears streaming down my face, begging for forgiveness and finally acknowledging the damage I've caused to our family, to our love, to everything we once held dear. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's a pill I know I have to swallow if I ever hope to find peace in this tangled mess we call life. He stood there in silence, his arms wrapped around me as I poured out my heart. Every day, he was there by my side, never straying too far except to have a chat with his fiancée, who also checked in on me regularly. Their kindness felt overwhelming, like a warm blanket on a cold winter's night, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't deserve it. She, his fiancée, went above and beyond, showing me kindness in ways I never expected. She even went as far as finding a therapist for me, footing the bill herself. The therapist didn't beat around the bush, she called it like she saw it. According to her, I was knee-deep in a midlife crisis, and instead of turning to my husband, I let these younger women pull my strings like a puppet. She painted a picture of their motives, suggesting that they were out to sabotage my marriage because they were single and maybe a bit bitter about it. To them, I was an easy target, a means to an end. It was like misery had found a companion, and the fact that the ringleader had once had an affair with my ex-husband only added fuel to the fire. After months of therapy, though, it became clear that I was still struggling to find my footing. That's when she suggested I take my feelings to Reddit, of all places. She said it could be therapeutic, a way to let out my emotions without the pressure of group therapy. So, I created an anonymous account and poured my heart out to strangers on the internet, hoping to find solace in their words. As for my ex's new wife, well, she's a gem. Always checking in on me, chatting with me, making sure I'm okay. And despite my inner turmoil, I can't help but feel a sense of warmth towards her. She's genuinely nice, and their twin boys. Adorable doesn't even begin to cover it. And then there's my ex himself, popping by every now and then to make sure I'm doing alright. Asking if I've been eating, assuring me that despite our rocky past, I'll always be the mother of his children, and he'll always be there for me as a friend. But it was last Saturday that really got to me. He showed up out of the blue, letting me take a break while he cleaned the house and whipped up breakfast. In that moment, with the smell of pancakes wafting through the air and the warmth of his kindness enveloping me, I couldn't help but break down and cry. Because deep down, beneath all the hurt and confusion, I realized just how much I missed him, missed my husband, missed my best friend. Even now, it's like I'm stuck in a maze, trying to make sense of how I got tangled up in this mess. Despite having my kids around, things just aren't the same as they used to be. They're here, physically, but the one person I ache for the most is nowhere to be found. He's moved on, and I can't help but feel like it's all my fault. Someday, I tell myself, I'll find a way to move forward, but for now, I can't shake this feeling that I deserve every ounce of pain I'm feeling. Update: I found myself in a conversation with someone, exchanging messages back and forth. I felt this need to set things straight, to talk about what my ex went through. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my place to delve into his pain. Despite my attempts to make amends, he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. To make matters worse, the situation was complicated by the fact that the person I was involved with just wouldn't leave me alone, no matter what I did. During the affair, I felt like I was living in some sort of fog, detached from reality. It's hard to put into words, almost like I was watching myself from outside my own body. The final day of the affair was meant to be the end of it all, but it left a mark on me that I can't shake. I remember begging my ex for another chance just days after he found out. But instead of giving me a glimmer of hope, he simply looked at me and walked away. He only spoke to me 3 times after that. The first was during the civil moment of signing the divorce papers. The second was when I reached out to him after my partner mistreated me, and the third was the day after he confronted my partner, almost resorting to violence. That day, all the emotions he'd been bottling up finally came pouring out. As I mentioned earlier, he has this tendency to let things fester until he explodes. And when he finally did, it was like a dam bursting open. He shouted at me, berating me for my foolish choices and lamenting how I'd wrecked him. But amidst all the anger and hurt, he made one thing clear: he couldn't afford to grieve our marriage because he had to stay strong for the kids. And in that moment, I realized just how much I'd cost him, Not just his marriage, but his sense of stability and security too. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I faced the shattered remnants of the man I once knew, a man of strength and unwavering devotion who would have moved mountains for me at the mere hint of a request. I offered up my apologies, but they fell on deaf ears. He brushed them aside, assuring me that my affair partner wouldn't trouble me again, and then he was gone, leaving me to grapple with the weight of my mistakes. It took a whole year before any semblance of normalcy returned to our interactions. For the longest time, he wanted nothing to do with me, immersing himself in the company of other women I knew, and I let him, understanding and even justifying his actions in my mind. But after that pivotal family meeting, a shift occurred. He began to soften, to act more civil, all for the sake of our children. During those trying times, the true extent of the damage I had wrought hit me like a freight train. Yet, slowly but surely, my kids began to thaw towards me. It was a gradual process, with my youngest taking the longest to come around, but I made a concerted effort to bridge the gap between us. Mending my fractured relationship with my children became my primary focus. As they started to notice my efforts, they began to open up, albeit tentatively. I watched from the sidelines as laughter returned to our home, spurred on by my ex-husband's jokes and his willingness to pitch in with household chores. He'd fire up the grill on weekends, dance with our daughters. Moments that once brought me joy, now served as a painful reminder of what I had lost. I clung to the hope that if I could just show him how genuinely remorseful I was, if I could prove that I was willing to put in the work, maybe, just maybe, I could win him back. I threw myself into every possible avenue of reconciliation, couples counseling, fresh starts, even dressing and grooming myself in ways I knew he liked. But each attempt fell flat, met with nothing but indifference on his part. That's why, in a moment of desperation, I tried to kiss him. I thought perhaps there was a flicker of hope, a chance for reconciliation, but he stopped me cold. I begged, I pleaded, but he remained resolute, staring at me with eyes that held only pain and regret. He explained that he couldn't bring himself to be with me, not after I had shattered his trust. He would never kiss me again, never hold me, never be intimate, knowing that another man had shared my bed. And when I brought up the women he'd been with post-divorce, he clarified that it was after our marriage had ended, a stark reminder that my transgressions had occurred during our sacred union. Your body and heart belong to me, just as mine belong to you, he said, his words cutting through me like a knife. And you destroyed that. Trying to maintain any semblance of friendship with him feels like trying to grasp onto sand slipping through my fingers. We were married for over 2 decades, and in the span of just 6 short months, I managed to tear it all down. And for what? A midlife crisis, a desperate longing for female companionship, a misguided attempt to fit in. Looking back now, I can't even recognize the person I was during that time. Every action I took felt like it belonged to a stranger, as if I were watching my life unfold from the outside. Thankfully, my third child, bless her heart, understood in a way that no one else did. Without her unwavering support, I shudder to think where I might have ended up. She was my anchor, keeping me tethered to reality when everything else felt like it was spiraling out of control. I'll never forget that day when she unexpectedly came to my rescue. Normally, the worst of the mistreatment would occur when the kids were out or during our commutes, but on this particular night, something inside me snapped. I found the courage to stand up for myself, to demand that he leave. Of course, he vehemently disagreed, and before I knew it, things turned violent. When he struck me and shoved me against the wall, my daughter appeared out of nowhere, bravely leaping to my defense. But he didn't hesitate to lash out at her too. In a moment of sheer panic, I struck back, fleeing with my little girl to the safety of the garage. He pounded on the door, his rage like a storm threatening to break through, until my ex-husband arrived just in the nick of time. I had to intervene to prevent a physical altercation, as my ex was ready to confront him with fists flying. His new wife has been a godsend for him, providing the support and stability he needed to rediscover himself and rebuild his life. I never intended to become a part of his new world, but she insisted, revealing that she too had escaped from an abusive relationship before meeting my husband. She made it clear that while she could be kind, she wouldn't hesitate to stand her ground if I crossed a line. My kids have taken quite a liking to her, especially since she's the one who taught most of them English. Yet, despite all this, I find myself still grappling with intense guilt that threatens to consume me. I've continued working at the same company, eventually rising to the position of manager, and I made the difficult decision to terminate those women who had once been a part of my husband's life. But even as I carry out my duties and go about my daily routine, a part of me can't help but yearn for what once was for the life and love I once shared with him. That's all.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.